Hi, welcome. I was like, we're all very excited to hear you. We spent last meeting talking about what was most important to committee members. And top of the list was creating a network plan, making sure we have an implementation plan, using that to build the capital improvement plan, accessibility considerations, identifying shovel-ready projects, considering high pedestrian traffic areas, and developing a communication plan. We're hoping, I know we can't do it all right necessarily now, but we're hoping that this will really set us up to do all of these things. And we're really excited to watch this presentation and engage in feedback right now.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm looking at this as a progress update. We have some existing conditions information that I want to go through with the committee because it sort of helps think to think about priorities in terms of bike and walk network improvements. And also there was a lot of feedback that we got from the online survey and also from the in-person meetings. So I wanted to kind of summarize that because that also helps to put things in perspective. Review the network that we talked about in May. And then we have looked at some sketches to kind of talk through some areas that were sort of identified as being of interest to look at. And then, then just starting to, Rob wants a prioritized list of network improvements. And so just starting with sort of a list of some of those areas that come out from existing conditions and also from the public and projects that are going on right now with respect to construction. So without any more introduction, I'm going to share my screen here. And I like to be, have a dialogue. So feel free to kind of ask questions as we go along. So just, a few photos, and these are just, I wish I had Google Glass sometimes when I'm, walking around in town and just seeing the variety of activity that we have. Little kids on bikes. This is by the library going into the path that goes to Hovey Lane. Lot of pedestrians in the downtown, a lot of pedestrians, crossing at Main and Wheelock. Bikes going across, shuttles and buses, just, this is such an important multimodal intersection here. Again, looking at, all ages and abilities, the importance of all ages and abilities with, adults, with kids. There's 2 kids here, it's like, what do we do now with the shared use path gone, continuing up Lime Road. And then also, something else that I think should be part of our planning is bike racks, better bike racks. I mean, that's also bike infrastructure. And it's important for bike racks to be close and work for the bikes that we're seeing now. It seems like a lot of the bikes are bigger now, and the little comb racks that we have downtown don't really work. Like, you can't get your tire into them. So people are, kind of freelancing how they park their bike. Okay, so the first thing I did is I started put on my Vision Zero hat, and I looked through the crash data that that Jenny gave me, and looked overall at the number of crashes over 10 years. I would have preferred 5 years, but unfortunately, the last 5 years was 3 COVID years. So, and we did see a difference in the COVID years. So I looked back 10 years. And the interesting thing overall, and this is true across the board, is that bike and ped crashes are much more likely to result in an injury because bikes and pedestrians are vulnerable users. So, 76% of all the bike and ped crashes resulted in an injury. So then we just looked at the bike and pedestrian injury crashes, just focusing on those because that's what our concern is. And you can see clearly there's kind of a down point in the COVID years, which is why we looked back 10 years instead of 5 years. And so if you take out the COVID years, 4.6 average, this is combined pedestrian and bicycle crashes a year. And that's been sort of holding steady. Although if you look by mode, it's different. So pedestrian injury crashes are trending down. And, congrats to the town. I know that they have focused on, marking crosswalks better and working with making pedestrian safety a priority in town. So that is paying off, and it's pretty significant. When you look here, 2016, there were 5 pedestrian injury crashes, 3 2015, and then 2023, 1 crash. Again, the COVID years I kind of discount, but the trends appear to be going in the right direction. But, vigilance, always keep up the vigilance on that. Okay, bicyclist injury crash trends, on the other hand, are trending up. So especially when you look in the post-COVID years, 23, 24, those years had 4, each had 4 injury bike crashes, up from sort of 2 crashes previously. And, this could be a lot of things. This could be more people on bikes around in town, more e-bikes, more scooters, or that kind of thing as well, more micro mobility. And then looking at trends by month, we're looking at, again, pedestrians in these graphs are red, bicyclists are blue. We're seeing, again, if we take all the crashes over the 10 years, that July through November is where we have more higher than average numbers. Probably more people are out walking and biking in those years. We certainly know we get a surge of pedestrians coming into town in September, October, August. So that is a trend that we're seeing here. And then injury crashes by time of day is also interesting. There's a cluster sort of in the noontime where there's higher, and then the 4 to 6 p.m. window. So that's something that, we see a lot when we look at crash data. That 4 to 6 p.m. time is the evening commute, after school commute, errand running commute after work. And there was an interesting meta study in the New York Times a few years ago that sort of suggested distracted driving at that point. People are, can you pick up some milk, texting, that kind of thing as they're leaving work. I don't know exactly, but these trends, and more people are out, more cars are out, more people are walking and biking. So all of those things come into play. But it's interesting to note those time periods. And then, we looked at pedestrian and bike injury crashes by street. And in this data, half of the injury crashes over the 10-year period were on Lebanon and East Wheelock Street. And 70%, were on Lebanon, the Wheelocks, North Main, and College Street. So, that's pretty interesting in and of itself when we think about, prioritizing pedestrian and bicycle safety, that kind of focusing on those core streets, which have a lot of traffic, both pedestrian, vehicle, bikes, is important. And then this is looking at the injury crashes by intersection. So intersections on East Wheelock and Lebanon Street were accounting for 50% of the crashes over the past 10 years. And then and this is interesting because this says why, you know, it's good to, why 5 years is a good time period. When you look, you know, over the 10-year period, you can see that, you know, obviously there was attention given to Lebanon Street. I know there was the signage went up. I don't know when that RFB went in by the Visual Arts Center, but you know, there was attention paid, and a lot of the crashes in Lebanon Street were pedestrian crashes, and that, you know, that has been addressed. It's much lower in the last 5 years than it was between 2015 and 2020. And that sort of looks, you know, reflects in the earlier data about the pedestrian kind of trending down crashes. And again, I'm only looking at injury crashes here. And then East Wheelock Street, on the other hand, is sort of gone up in the last 5 years. There are more crashes there, both bike and pedestrian. So that's, in that, I think this is kind of also influencing the trend lines that we were seeing in those earlier graphs. So just some pedestrian safety takeaways that this sort of suggests is the town's vigilance about pedestrian safety appears to be going well. So, you know, kudos, and, you know, keep up the good work. The bicyclist injury crash trends are increasing. You know, a lot of the injury bike ped crashes are occurring on a few streets. And, you know, the number of injury crashes higher than average July through November suggests possibly that, you know, maybe some pedestrian and bicycle education and outreach might help people when, you know, to walk and bike and drive more safely. So that's kind of the look at the crash data. Is there any questions or comments, feelings about that at all?
Can you hear us, Karen? This is Bill Young.
Hi, Bill. Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. That's wonderful to look at all this data. Somebody's done a whole lot of hard work. I have a few questions. Your source of information. Are you looking, I assume you're looking with Ms. Rathbone and the people, James Martin is here from the police department. You're, I assume, looking at data that comes through the police. Is that correct? Yes.
Yep. Jenny gave me some, I was even more than 10 years, I think 20 years, a lot of data in spreadsheets. So that's the source of the data.
Second question, are you also talking to people at Dick's house at the Student Health Service to look at their data?
No, I haven't. I just received data from the town.
It's my perception from over the years talking to students and people, medical staff at Dick's house, that if you're not looking at that, you're missing a significant amount of the information. I may be in error, but I would encourage anybody who's doing this to sort of build some collaboration. I've spoken to many students who've actually been injured and went to Dick's house. I don't know whether, maybe Jim, you know from here, whether every patient, every student who comes in with a road scrape or injury to Dick's house gets reported to the Hanover police.
No, it does not. I don't know what record keeping they do over there as far as reporting those.
About half, and I say that simply because half of the citizens in the community and probably the majority of the people injured are students. And if they end up at the hospital or going to the police, they get a report that they don't. So I think we're missing data. That's just I guess my first point. The second point, any thoughts about that from your point of view?
If there's unreported crashes, then it wouldn't be showing up in this data. I don't know if Dick's house would share the data that they have with us, but that would be helpful.
So I know at least 3 students who I know who have had crashes on skateboards or bikes or whatever, and they went to Dick's house, and I just don't know whether that shows up. So I think we have a little bit of a question about whether we have fully complete information in that regard. I would add, just as an addendum to that, that I've been pushing for a bunch of years to have a more in complete communication, and I don't know that we have that yet. And Jim just mentioned that at the, Chief Martin mentioned that he's not sure they would share that. I think that's something we should try to resolve if we can, just to know that if people are going into Dick's house.
So
and-
Bill, I think this is really well noted now, and it's not something that Carolyn can solve. And I really want to make sure we get through this presentation. Do you have something else to add?
I do, yes. 2017, I was looking back, trying to find out when the bike path went in because of the bike walk to school day. Someone had asked, when did it start? And it was 2016 that went in. I didn't see anything about the fatality, in the town from a pedestrian bicycle accident. And that's just something that I think is a cloud back there in 2017. I also saw a letter from the daughter of the woman who died at that time, and that wasn't and that's something I think we just need as we're doing things, takeaways. We need to kind of be cognizant of that happened, and try to make sure that we think about it as we go forward to try to, for our infrastructure development, for our laws for enforcement and so forth.
Yeah, no, that's good. So that was, you're saying that was in 2016?
17, I think.
2017. Okay, it would be good to kind of nail that down.
And my final point is I guess, since we have Dartmouth David Anderson's here from the college and Jim from the police today, there's major construction going on West Wheelock at the present time. I have to look back. Is it Wheelock Street? Both sides. I lost too much information. West Wheelock, I think, is a accident-prone area just from walking it. Jenny and I looked at it carefully, trying to figure out about safe streetscapes and so forth. As that is developed, trying to minimize the number of students and others who want to cross the street at odd places, and they will. They do.
Right.
Would be helpful if we can figure out how to keep everybody who's on the north side, the side toward campus, to just make it easy as possible for them to get back to campus and other places without, or the west, without crossing the street quite so much. Anyway, that involves walkways and elevators and all kinds of things, just to try to make it very attractive and easy for people coming up that hill to not zigzag back and forth across the street.
Yes, agreed. And on that front, the zoning was increased, the density was increased there on both sides of the street. So, I did see there is a concept for a shared use path on the north side of the street, which is good. That would bring people right up. But, maybe the south side too, just given that, there's going to be high density housing on both sides. So that's sort of a consideration as well. There may be areas, where we need just more space because there are so many bicycles and pedestrians and scooters, and it's important. And, we definitely want to encourage that. We want that's such a walkable, bikeable location for student housing. We want to make it safe. It needs to be thought through. Couple of notes on walking and biking patterns. So we looked at Strava data. It's a little bit skewed towards competitive athletics, but it still is helpful to sort of see the distribution of walking and biking in Hanover. And on the left is the walking. So, you see things like the two tracks, really pop out as well. But I thought it was interesting just how much walking there was going on. You see a lot of the Pine Parks trails, you see the core streets. It's interesting to me how much you see on Rip Road showing up with walking, Reservoir Road, Lime Road, the core streets here. That's the network around Ockham Pond, a lot of walking activity in those areas. And then on the right is the cycling routes. And again, it's interesting. You get a sort of a sense of overall numbers by looking at the width of the lines. But it's interesting to me, Old Tuck Drive really pops out as being sort of important for bicycling. And, you know, you get a sense about where people are biking, definitely Lebanon Street, Greensboro, Lime Road, Reservoir Road, Wheelock, South Main, North Main. So it's kind of interesting to get an overall pattern of cycling in town. And then we also looked at replica data, which is a big data source. They get like cell phone data, GPS data. It's a big data, and they process it for transportation, and they collect counts. They do a lot of things. But one of the things that we looked at was trip lengths in Hanover, and a lot of the automobile trips in Hanover are short and could be easily made by walking and biking, which, I mean, it's obvious, right? It's obvious to us, like knowing the town, it's very walkable. A lot of things are close together, but it does sort of suggest that particularly in the, half a mile to mile, 1 to 2 miles, really easy biking distance that we could capture more trips. These are automobile trips that we're looking at here by walking and biking. And, so if you think about mode shift, 43% of the automobile trips are 2 miles and under. So, that's with and that's sort of the takeaway there. And this is, I should say, they also sort of synthesize data at Replica. And so this is a typical fall weekday in terms of the data for trip lengths in 2024. So 43% of the trips are 2 miles and under. So that's, it's pretty good. So, the takeaway there is that, more trips can be made because they're short by walking, biking, micromobility with the development of a high comfort network. Any questions on that kind of walking and biking patterns?
We have one here.
Hi.
Dia.
Yeah, so I think that your data is really picking up sort of the tip of the iceberg, because I've observed, it's kind of a crazy thing to do, but just go out there on some of these roads that are high risk and just observe for an hour. And it's like really scary, because within that hour, there's a very high probability, at least in my experience, that you're going to see, say, a pedestrian or a cyclist come within a couple of feet of having an accident. So the near accidents,
yeah,
so much higher than
near misses. Yeah.
In fact, I almost got whacked the other night when I was crossing with the blinking lights and everything. Very conscientious driver, but there was just a misinterpretation of things. I came within 3 to 6 feet of being hit. And this happens all the time, I think. And so it would be interesting. You need volunteers, but they actually do observers of some of these high risk areas and see the near accidents. It's really frightening when you see
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, near misses are, there are some ways that can be analyzed through, video and kind of AI looking at videos. I've seen it done in some places, but I think it's interesting to get just input from people. It certainly is cheaper. I mean, we know where they're, from these other, looking at the Strava data, just where people are walking and biking and, where there are a lot of cars. And so near misses are real. It's a real thing. And it makes me think of at the open house, we had one person who is a regular bike commuter. And, he spoke about the 2 places where he's been doored is on East Wheelock Street and by the high school. So it's like, that's, again, interesting information to help sort of think about street design and priorities. So I'm going to the online survey now. There were 230 responses at the time I downloaded this, I guess, in the beginning of September. And, you know, there's so much data in there. People were really very thoughtful about their responses, and then kind of getting our head around that is a lot. But again, it's interesting to hear what people said. So, you know, why do people walk? Typically, it's errands, shopping, socializing, exercise, and recreation, much more than the typical kind of commute patterns. And again, this is not unusual. Non-commute trips are a lot of trips, and that they are often more amenable to walking and biking. And so we're seeing that here too. And this is, so I said there were 230 people that responded. These percentages are, you could check more than one box. So, you know, 92% of people, you know, walk for errands, 90% shopping, dining out, that kind of thing. So these charts are all sort of organized in the same way, this way. This is the actual number of responses down below, and the percentage is the percentage of people that responded this way. Where would you like to walk more frequently but find it difficult for any of the following reasons? So 34% of people said sidewalks or path are not available where I would want to walk. And we'll see in a minute, you know, sort of where these were. Poor weather. So it's interesting to me, 23% talked about poor weather as being something that discourages them from walking. Pedestrian crossings do not feel safe. So 20% of the respondents checked that box. Sidewalks are in poor condition. 20% of the people, distances are too long. 17% of the people noted that. You know, can you provide specific locations where, if there were improvements, you might choose to walk? So, you know, this is the top mentions. There were, you know, more streets that were mentioned twice or one time, but Greensboro Road by far was mentioned the most. And this also was in the outreach that we did at the open house. Greensboro Road was mentioned a lot. So going back to that question, sidewalks or paths are not available where I want to walk. So, you know, Greensboro is one road that doesn't have sidewalks very far out. South Main Street, east side from Dorrance to Mink Brook was mentioned several times. Rip Road was mentioned several times. I'd say the discussion of a sidewalk on Rip Road predates my, you know, 25 years in Hanover. So, I mean, it is something that's been talked about a lot. Lebanon Street, downtown to DHMC. So, you know, people say, well, you get part of the way there, but not quite all the way there. Reservoir Road from the Ray School to Stores Pond, Oak Hill. I thought that was interesting. You know, the two wheelocks people mentioned, you know, there are sidewalks on both sides. This might be, you know, a sidewalk condition or something along those lines. Rip Road again. So the Rip Road initial one, 7 responses, that was people who specifically mentioned a sidewalk. And this one was more kind of general, like the word sidewalk didn't come in the comment. Trescott Road, that was also interesting to me. A lot of people mentioned a sidewalk or a side path. Lebanon Street, Greensboro to Centera was also mentioned. Etna Road, Reservoir Road to Grass Road, and the west end of Hanover. Those are 3 mentions each. So those were the top streets people mentioned for needing walking improvements. And then I also looked at intersections that people mentioned a lot. So the Co-op intersection was mentioned 4 times specifically. College Street at East Wheelock was mentioned 3 times. That's been recently done. So, you know, that was like in construction until very recently, I think. So it's, you know, some of this might predate that. School Street at Maple Street was mentioned a couple times. Well, a lot of it is the intersection is kind of skewed a little bit, and then there's a bush on the south west corner that blocks sight distances. That was mentioned a couple times. And then West Street, West Wheelock and Engineering Drive was mentioned a couple times, which is interesting because that has a pedestrian refuge, it has a walk signal, you know, all of that's relatively new. I think that you know, several people said, you know, it should be a roundabout. People don't like waiting there. So that's just, you know, the comments that we got. And then some crosswalks that were mentioned: Crosby, Sandburn, Lebanon Street, that by the Catholic Church there was mentioned 6 times. Dunster Drive at South Main, 5 people, you know, mentioned that. There's a desire for a new crossing there. South Main at Allen Street, two mentions there. And the kind of Lebanon Street at the Co-op by the bus stop was mentioned a couple times as well. This one, I believe, has an RRFB. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, so then turning to bikes. You know, why do people bike? Similar to walking, really, not as much commuting, but really sort of non-commute trips, of which, again, there are a lot. Particularly, again, in Hanover, there's a nice mix of uses. A lot of people who bike for exercise. So, you know, over half of the respondents are, you know, recreational cyclists. But also people run errands, you know, visit friends, shop or dine out, go to those trips by bike. What would make you bike more frequently? And, you know, 49% say biking does not feel safe. 43% bike lanes or paths are not available where I want to bike. 21% poor weather. So in the overall scheme of things, it's like it's more kind of safety concerns and facility accommodation concerns over weather concerns. And, you know, there are various other things people mentioned. Distances are too long at 7%. Only 7% of the respondents. Specific locations. Oops, did I skip the tree? Where there were improvements you might choose to bike, okay? Lebanon Street, Route 120 to DHMC, 23 mentions. So that was a lot. And it makes sense. Like there, a lot of people go back and forth between downtown, and if it were separated from traffic better, it's quite attractive, nice way to bike during the day. But I think the people mentioned, you know, the bike lanes feel sort of scary. They're not buffered. There's a lot of traffic. And it would be nice to have more separation. So 23 mentions of that route. South Main Street, downtown to Sachem. That kind of was interesting to me. 16 people mentioned that route. South Park Street, 14. Again, I found that interesting. That, you know, those were really the top locations that people mentioned. South Main Street and downtown. I was actually surprised that this one wasn't higher because it just feels so scary to bike on South Main Street with, you know, cars backing out. But North Park Street, East Wheelock Street, Lime Road, extending the shared use path to Wilson's Landing. There were several comments along those lines. Greensboro Road, 5 comments. So a lot of people, I think, bike and feel comfortable on Greensboro Road. So it was really heavy on a sidewalk desire for Greensboro Road. Main Street, Rip Road came up, Lebanon Street in town, Lime Road, Truscott Road. Can you provide locations? So, and then now looking at intersections. So a lot of people mention East Wheelock and College Street, 23. There are 23 mentions, and this is in the bike category. So several 23 bicyclists, like a lot, mentioned this intersection. I think a lot of this predates the recent reconfiguration there, but it may still not quite feel safe for people. And then, you know, kind of far below that, Lebanon Street at Greensboro Road, the Co-op intersection, Lebanon at Crosby Street, and the Lime Park and College Street intersections. So those were all raised by bicyclists. Then we also looked at transit. Transit is part of our shared system here. And it was interesting to see, you know, about half the people that responded don't use transit, half do. And again, similarly, and this may be a reflection of perhaps people that use the college shuttles and such, but 18% go to work. So it kind of you're seeing a little bit more commuting on the buses than on walking and biking, but a lot of errand running, working, shopping, dining, socializing for why people use transit. I thought that was interesting. And locations where bus stop improvements are needed. So Wyeth and Dudster Road was mentioned 7 times, South Main and Allen Street, Lebanon Street and Brockway. Sometimes it's better crosswalks. Sometimes it's a desire for a shelter. Sometimes you want to feel safe crossing the street when you're depending on transit, because in one direction you're going to be on one side of the street, and in the other direction you're going to be on the other side of the street. Lebanon Street out Route 120 outbound. So that bus stop by the foot of Guile Hill at Buck Road, that's that one, was mentioned several times. Valley Road at Park Street. I think that there's some housing there across from the tennis courts, I think for like independent living for folks that have disabilities. South Main at Irving, this has been interesting. Like there's a lot, like that's a busy bus stop. And it's a lot with the shuttles that go through there. And I saw, the other day, a big like tour bus. Like I think it looked like a tour bus. I don't know if it was a college sports team or if it was leaf peepers or whatever, but that area is pretty busy. North College Street, a couple mentions at the high school, a couple mentions for bus stops. So this is input to give to Advanced Transit, I think. They do at times, look at getting grants for bus stop improvements, and that might be something that they could consider. Any questions on the survey input?
Karen, it's Bill Young. Just two observations. One is I'm disappointed that there wasn't more input. You had 200 and some respondents to this survey, and it's been out there for quite a while, I think. And you can't change it today, but I think that's one of those things that the town could come to the Bike Walk Committee, Advisory Committee, to put us to work to try to gather data. I don't know whether, I somehow think that a push to lean on people to respond is reasonable. I mean, we could offer prizes or could be or tase them or something to make them fill out the survey, but that's a joke, of course. But basically, I think if we had some on-street presence or some active kind of way to kind of get people, other than just the digital, please fill out a survey. That's an observation. The second is that I don't, since some of this has happened, Dartmouth has put in a very large busing system. And I actually have a question whether the campus connector buses, whether I as a resident in town could get on a campus connector bus or go somewhere, or whether an Appalachian Trail hiker could get on a bus and go somewhere. Dave, you're
Currently.
not currently, okay, thank you.
They're restricted to students. Theoretically, you're supposed to show your ID. I don't think you always force people to do that, but you could, but the policy. But I know there is conversation about maybe that changing in the future.
Well, I would just put in a pitch to make that a possibility. I've spoken to 150 Appalachian Trail hikers this summer, 3 of them as recently this morning, who are trying to get from A to B, and they wouldn't mind. They love to go independently, do things on their own, and Advanced Transit has been phenomenal for getting them free to places. So if that can move forward, then I will look carefully at what their schedules are and say, hey, you can get down to Summit, and closer to the motel if you want to on a bus.
So,
Okay, that's good. I will say 230 is pretty good. for a town of our size. Just, speaking from working across a lot of towns, that's not a bad response rate. And it gives us a lot, it does give us a good amount of information that I don't think is too skewed to one person or another type of thing. More is always better, certainly, but I was pleasantly surprised actually how many surveys we got back.
Okay.
Carolyn, I think, I'm not sure if did you have a question about why people walking might not be enthusiastic about the co-op park in Lebanon spot? Because what I hear is sometimes people don't get through the signal. If you're walking from like the Greensboro area, there's sort of a request that you wait 2 minutes to cross like the co-op driveway. Like I think there are, like the RRFBs, like they're not pedestrian triggered, they're within a cycle.
Yeah,
I think there's also, people off, maybe it ties into the Brockway stuff, but there's often a need, I think, to cross further south. So, and then just the sidewalk scapes, particularly on the west side, actually on both sides, are just really cut up. So I think you have some places that don't feel very safe, depending
the
on
west side of South Park or
the west side of Lebanon Street.
the west
There's
side of
like,
Lebanon.
also like the Lebanon Street sidewalk is discontinuous on the east side of Lebanon Street. So a lot of people get caught out. Like they
Yeah,
just find themselves walking along the road.
yeah,
I think because they expect a sidewalk there and then they find they don't want to cross the road to get on the sidewalk because they're trying to get to the other side. So then
right.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
the Appalachian Trail hikers are probably not taking the survey, but
Yeah.
I think that happens to them quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I think there are a number of reasons why that would show up on walking. I was surprised it didn't show up more on biking because
Yes.
I feel
Yeah.
like-
I was surprised too, because it's phenomenally hard to get to by bike. I mean,
yeah, I hear a lot of
Yeah.
grievances around that intersection from every single direction, and they're all slightly different, but
right.
and people who have gotten clipped and sort of stopped riding because of that.
Yeah.
From that intersection.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Scott.
Hi, you had the bus stop at 120 in Greensboro Road southbound. Are the people who are saying that that's this is the bus stops? Is this the bus stop one?
Oh, whoops. Yeah. Sorry. The bus stop one. Yeah.
Yeah, Lebanon Street at Route
120 outbound. Yeah. I
right.
think that's lack of a shelter. Like
Okay.
I see people standing out there in the weather, and it's my sense.
Okay.
Yeah, if people were coming from Greensboro and going to the hospital, they would probably hop on there, right?
Or if they live in Guile Hill and they're going to Lebanon or to Plainfield Street, the Strip, Miracle Mile, any of that, if they're doing any of that, or even to the hospital, if they want to take a bus to the hospital from Guile, that's where they'll be waiting. So we used to have a saying, if you feel like a homeless person waiting for the bus, the stop isn't good. And that's like, I think about that when I see people at that.
Well, it's interesting there because there is a northbound bus stop at Lebanon Street and Greensboro Road, but there is no southbound. You have to go all the way to what is it?
The foot of Guile, Buck Road. It's
Buck Road is the one I was after.
Yeah. Yeah.
And particularly in the winter, I walked home rather than go out to there and come back, simply because the snow gets piled up and you have to be in the dark walking against traffic. It's no fun.
It's no fun. And it's interesting, you know, again, speaking like I was on the Advanced Transit Board a long time. And, you know, they look at boardings and alightings. At the time, that was more people getting off, not as many people boarding. So when you're boarding, you're kind of standing out there. But I think the patterns have really changed. And I think, you know, with people, you know, living in Guile Hill, people working more at Centera, you just see so many people even walking up and down Route 120 between Greensboro and Centera a lot now. And, you know, there's no accommodation for that.
And Carolyn, speaking to that, and Scott can probably speak to this more, but Advanced Transit has an open data set now where they've been tracking both the boardings and they've been tracking both rather than just one. And we can see those increases. It's been a tremendous increase in the last couple of years.
Yes. I mean,
The
yeah,
headway.
they've increased their service. Like, it's incredible.
Mm.
Like the Saturday service, and it's like, it's huge.
The pink
It's
line.
very good.
Karen, it's Bill with a quick point.
Yep.
Number of slides that you've had, I think, have pointed out that the missing link that goes from Buck Road up to the entrance to whatever North Access Road to the Dartmouth College at the gas station there. There is no sidewalk. There is no bike path. To walk, you need to walk in the bicycle breakdown lane.
Right.
There had been an offer by Athos Ratio, one of the other select board members, to kind of join with us somewhere along the way to try to collaborate with the hospital. This is familiar to all of you. We've tried to do this before and not without success. And it all comes down to who's going to pay for an extension of that. And you know well about the struggles with Department of Transportation. I'd just like to say that we should keep trying for another 10 years to get that done.
Yes, keep trying. One thing is, you know, the New Hampshire DOT actually has a bike and pedestrian master plan for the state now. And, you know, that is new-ish. I think that's been out for, I know it was a long time coming, but they do finally have a bike and pedestrian master plan. And, you know, clearly you have one of the biggest employment centers in the state that you can't walk to very safely from a lot of housing. So, you know, I think that there's a good case to, you know, just to approach them about that. And I think, you know, just, you know, the hospital and the town talking together with DOT, I think it's worth it. I agree with you to stay on that one.
Thank you.
Okay, the recommended network. So we went over this in May. So this is a repeat, but you know, when do we separate? When can we share? And, you know, that's been, you know, something that has been within the last 10 years, really pretty standardized, based on vehicle speed and vehicle volumes. So speed is very concerning. It's so interesting to me, the percentage in this graph is used all the time, but you know, at 20 miles an hour, being a pedestrian being hit by a car at 20 miles an hour has a 13% likelihood of fatality or severe injury. Just 10 miles per hour faster at 30 miles per hour, that increases to 40%. That's, you know, that's a big difference between 20 and 30 miles per hour in terms of the likelihood of a fatal or serious or severe injury. So speed, very important. And then, you know, key considerations for bicyclists. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit before, but, you know, what facilities make riders feel safer? So, there's all kinds of riders out there, people who are very confident, like some of you. And then when you look at, the range down to, kids and older people, families, they want more separation. And so a lot of the riders that we see out there now are the more confident riders, and they're comfortable with riding in a shoulder, riding in a shared lane. But most of the riders that are out there want separation from traffic through, and what I hear is people want a shared use path or a cycle track. They don't even like buffered bike lanes. So, again, when we think about a high comfort network, when we think about all ages and abilities, which is what we need if we're, have a goal of mode shift, which is in the master plan, then we need to appeal to, a broader segment of riders. So this is an interesting kind of alignment between the type of rider and the type of bicycle facilities. And then, this is chart FHWA bikeway selection, how to, to think about your network. And this is, volume on one axis and speed on the other. So, 25 miles per hour, 2,000 cars per day, that's a very low volume street. It's sharing is workable. When you start to get up to 4,000 cars per day, 25, 30 miles an hour, a bike lane, buffered bike lane. And then, higher volume streets that are a little faster, separation through a bike lane, a side path, or a shared use path. Separated bike lane would be, like a cycle track or a shared use path or a side path. So this is kind of helps us answer that question, because every rider would answer differently about whether they're comfortable on this street or not. And this helps us sort of ground the decision about separating or not separating based on pretty clear metrics. So, separate when necessary and share when you can. But it's based on speed and volume. So this is the bike network. The red streets are where bike accommodations are recommended to be separated from traffic. Probably comes as no surprise. Wheelock Street, Main Street, Lebanon Street, Park Street, Lime Road, around the Green, even Reservoir Road up until Rip Road, is getting at the volumes that we would want to have separation. The yellow streets, we can look at shared accommodations. This includes Rip Road, by the way, here. We did place in from input from the committee, the kind of this back behind the alumni gym path as a potential shared accommodation. And, we have a pretty good network with all of these streets to move around in Hanover. This is a draft, by the way. I do need to see if we can find some volumes for some of these other streets. But so this kind of tells us when we think about making improvements, are we separating or not? And then here's sort of the larger, kind of looking out larger in Hanover. And that, here, Greensboro, Etna. So this is, I think, speed more than volume that's driving this for separation. So that's the network. Questions on the draft network?
Yeah, I had some questions around, well, like Summer Street, because even though maybe it could be shared, it's basically like a parking lot of cars. So I see people like riding from behind the cars, like into the opposite lane, then usually onto the sidewalk. And then sometimes walking their bike, sometimes not. But it's just directly between the high school and a lot of Dartmouth athletic facilities. And
Right.
it's like, even though the speeds and overall volumes might not warrant separation, it seems like we need more consideration there. That it wouldn't just be like shared bike accommodations. So I know there's probably a pretty big middle of what shared bike accommodations could mean as opposed to totally separated.
Yes, absolutely.
Just
Yeah.
think that kind of stands out to me. And then similarly, in part because we have had, and then also, I know you don't have the 24 to 25 data, but we've had even more injuries at like Crosby and Wheelock. And that connection is really low volume vehicles. I don't think we have the counts, but we kind of just know from experience, it doesn't see the volumes that Lebanon Park, Wheelock, even College or South Main see, but people are getting hurt there. So
Yeah, I agree with you on Crosby Street and you know, and so some of these streets like Summer Street, hey, it's right by the high school. You know, we haven't really talked about, you know, there are treatments for these streets. You know, we can traffic calm. Maybe there's signage, branding, sharrows, things that help make people aware to sort of make this a bicycle priority street.
Yeah, those both, I would say something is in order that's probably way stronger than a Sharrow if we want to take seriously like building out a local network where
Yeah.
the younger people in town can kind of easily get to where they're going. And that said, I think, you know, a lot of older people go to these places as well. A lot of people go to see games at both the high school and, you know, the college, and they teach there and their staff. And
right.
I feel like that's, I know we have it similarly, like, I don't know what the numbers are on Wentworth, and I'm sure during the 4 to 6 p.m. we see some volume there, but we've made it like the idea of a separated accommodations around the green, which I think probably makes a lot of sense given the number of people moving around outside of vehicles. And I would just say that, you know, from like a town perspective, this area around the high school and the Crosby connection perhaps warrants similar attention.
I agree. And we did a
I know
sketch
we
of
don't
Crosby and
quite
we did
have,
separation.
yeah, the same volumes of pedestrians maybe at every hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
But a lot, and that's like part of our center.
Agreed.
You know, on Crosby Street, I don't think biking on Crosby Street is hard. I think getting off of Crosby Street on either end is what's hard.
That's fair.
You get, if you're going north on Crosby Street, you're probably going to want to go left towards the green, and that takes you across 2 lanes of traffic where there's no stop sign or anything. Traffic just keeps flowing there unless there's a pedestrian crossing. And similarly, if you're going south on Crosby Street and wanting to go left towards anything down the co-op, anything down that direction, you again have no way across the 2 lanes of traffic. You're just sort of sitting there watching cars go by and trying to guess when it's safe, which is even trickier because there's parked cars which block your view off to the left. So I don't know whether the separated bike accommodations helps, but something at those ends to make it easier to do left turns would be very helpful.
I think that's accurate. I think it's a different issue than summer too.
Still just a thought following up on Scott's question. When Dartmouth did their planning for the future, they had some traffic planners involved in the process. And they came up with a map. I'm assuming that that is something that the town is looking at as they move forward with their work. And within that map were several connected and protected off-road systems to kind of, that would fit with a lot of the things that you're talking about, which is really kind of sort of putting in some new pathways that perhaps would connect with something that goes behind the, behind the athletic facility and so forth. So, and then would be something that would then continue across Crosby and avoid needing to make those turns that Scott's just talking about. So these paths that have been proposed might actually be some way to avoid doing some things on the street. If the build out as it goes on over the next 10 years happens, then perhaps they can put in some pedestrian bicycle paths only that get you off the streets.
I'm not sure if we're gonna avoid crossing the streets. Just because we gotta get where we're going, you know? I think the whole idea of a network is, we gotta look at even these corridors that we've maybe historically seen as designed primarily for vehicles, as coming up with a way to make them accessible, coming up with a way to move through a network so that everyone can get where they're going.
Agreed. I'm just sort of hoping that both are looked at the same time. Just as an addendum to that, there's concern about how to do Main Street and how to decrease traffic going down Main Street, to encourage people who are coming through town not to use Main Street to go through town, if I'm understanding things correctly. That would mean that anybody coming up from Ledyard Bridge would then go straight past the green on the left, the Hanover Inn on the right, on Wheelock Street, and go to Park Street. And so there would actually, if things change the way I anticipate the traffic flow will change, the volume of vehicles going straight and making it even, that those turns would be even more difficult. So I'm just hoping that as they plan, that they'll bring as the power plant is removed and all that sort of thing happens, that there will be a path that would go from the power plant across Crosby Street and behind the gymnasium and across down to Valley Roads area, to just allow people to kind of move through places and not be right on the highway with their bicycle. One final thing, we haven't heard yet anything about micro e-mobility, which I think has changed the story. There are 2 new people here. Are there any students using scooters or scooters or skateboards at the college now? That's a joke.
Oh.
Well, the scooter traffic is very, very high. Most of the athletes on campus use either scooters or bicycles to get around.
And I guess I make sort of joking about it, but as we go forward, I think we really need to have another category that sort of says what's happening with e-mobility. Because I think they are moving at much higher speeds silently and dangerously than some of the other things. So that's all. I haven't seen anything relative to that on our presentation so far. So we just need to be aware of it.
I think what Bill means is scooters.
Yeah.
He doesn't mean motorized scooters. He doesn't motorized.
Yeah, the e-scooters.
He means e-scooters.
Oh yeah,
That's what he's referring to.
those.
'Cause I know a lot of the athletes rode the little mopeds and all that, but I think he's referring to the e-scooters.
The e-scooters are definitely, it'll be most of the football guys, basketball guys, some of the girls on the volleyball team I've noticed a lot. Basically any sport where they're trying to save their legs to walk around, they'll creep up on you. They'll just fly right next to you on the sidewalk or on the green. So it is
They go from the street to the sidewalk, back to the street, and back to the sidewalk in one block.
exactly. Quick.
Keep going.
Okay, Carolyn.
That's a topical issue. E-mobility and guidelines for that. I know that some of my colleagues are working with various colleges about that. So, it's definitely a good point. But, I mean, more width in shared use paths, more ways to accommodate scooters, you know, I'd really much rather have people here on scooters and e-bikes than cars. So, you know, thinking about how, you know, we can make it all work together, I think is important. I myself ride an e-bike around, and I ride really slow. A lot of bikes top out at 18 miles per hour. I think they keep designing them to go faster and faster. But I'm sort of a chicken, and speed, no matter what, is just not good. I just don't think it's a good thing. So I'm, you know, always very, personally, just speaking for myself, wary of going too fast. So we were talking about Crosby Street. We did look at, you know, a sketch for Crosby Street. And, you know, I sort of, we talked about this in the charrette, and it's, as Jenny said, you know, the thing about the street is like it curves, you know, there's a lot of traffic, there's the cars that are parked there. And so we did look at a separated accommodation. This is East Wheelock Street here. One thing about Wheelock Street is that, you know, there's a concept for shared use path on the north side of Wheelock Street, you know, where the new housing is going in. And then, you know, it seems like we don't want bikes to be going like this. So, you know, being on the north side from the river, you know, to Park Street is, you know, what makes sense for the network, especially going through there. There may be areas where it's such heavy pedestrian and bicycle traffic that having, you know, wider accommodations that can handle both bikes and pedestrians on both sides, if there's space, would be desirable. And this is, you know, this is a concept, is what we've showed here. And so we basically looked at a shared use path, a 10-foot path, trying to avoid trees. We kept it two-way. Most of the traffic is going northbound on this street, but Hanover's network is, you know, there's not a lot of redundancy in the network, and it seemed like changing it to one way may not be ideal. So we left it at two ways. And this is just, you know, for discussion. But then it gets very tight right here next to the stadium. And so we took the parking off of one side, and that gave us space. And then this intersection down here is really wide at Lebanon Street. So this gave us space for a two-way cycle track to continue down to Lebanon Street. So it's a concept that seems like it's one way to think about how Crosby Street might be more complete and safe and accommodate bicycles and pedestrians, particularly as one of the committee members talked about right now, that there is a lot of bike and scooter traffic to the gym complex back here.
Carolyn, just so I make sure I'm clear, so the top left of the screen on Crosby Street is a shared use path, and then your transition.
Yes.
So explain the need to transition it to bi-directional.
It's real, well, so this is two-way because it's shared use. The problem is we couldn't continue it here because it's really tight up against the stadium at that location. You know, there's not that much room between the pedestrians. And then also with all the pedestrian traffic outside the stadium at, you know, certain times, just, it seemed like separating the bikes from the pedestrians seemed like it would work better here. It's this is sort of a pinch point here between the trees, the stadium wall, and the sidewalk there. So it's a, you know, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but that's why we did it that way.
And Carolyn, this is Hugh. And have you eliminated traffic all along Crosby Street? Where have you eliminated parking? I'm sorry, where have you eliminated parking along Crosby Street?
There's parking on this side here. It's under the tree. And I apologize, this aerial isn't great. But yeah, we took this out here. And then, you know, we pinched this in a bit as well. this intersection here. There's like, right now, there's 2 lanes here. There's a through left, I think, and a right. So just 1 lane, there's not that much traffic going in the southbound direction. And 1 lane is, can handle that. This could also be a roundabout. This could be a mini. Also,
What were
It's,
your
you know-
thoughts on that? Because that seems like an elegant way to perhaps handle like people going to the church, people crossing, like this really does also connect right up to the high school.
right,
And I also find that speeds seem to increase with drivers on Lebanon around that curve.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That
So
seems a
yeah,
good-
that's
Okay.
entirely possible. It's a pretty big intersection there.
That seems a good spot for a mini to me.
Okay,
That
That's
solves
good.
the left turn problem there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Joanna also had mentioned that it would be interesting to her at some point. I don't know if that's still something, David, you guys are talking about, but Joanna has brought that up at the select board before, that she was trying to get NHDOT to put one there because they wanted to
H-
experiment roundabout.
Oh, okay, well, it's a good, so we're happy to do that. I was trying to do less intensive reconstruction, but I'm happy to drop a mini in there. I do agree with Scott and Jenny, making those turns is difficult and would be facilitated by a mini. So we can update that. But I just wanted to this is why I wanted to have a dialogue with you all about
Yeah,
this.
the pedestrian traffic on Sundays, just going in and around that church, is also, I think, another reason just to have like single lanes to cross. Like, it's really just quite busy all day on Sundays. And then, well, there's also a church at the school right now. This is just a
Right,
ton of people walking around and just crossing the street everywhere.
right. So I can update the sketch to include that.
One other quick point, would you go back to the slide without the drawings on it, just for a second, without the overlay I just wanted to point out one thing just as a follow-up, but this Crosby, if I recall, is one of the heaviest accident locations in town, so some solution to that is important. What I was talking about before about avoiding these turns down here, this is the street, this is the athletic facility over here on the left. I'm not sure you can see me, but you know where the athletic facility is. And then
Yeah.
football stadium is on the right.
Yeah,
You proposed a path there, a shared use path for coming behind those buildings as a pedestrian mall kind of thing with some sporting kind of theme where the baseball field and all that is and football field are. But something that comes through, then it goes across Park Street. Hugh Mellard actually lobbied strongly for a safer crossing there and it is now a rapid flashing beacon with the lighting down on it.
yeah,
Works nicely. And that then ends up on the Valley Road Extension shared use pass, which you kind of promoted years ago. But if you just continued that straight across here, this is going to change. There's some way to get a path that comes right along here where Mackenzie Hall is, or around Mackenzie Hall, to then get you up to near the Hopkins Center, which would be a way for people coming from the east to avoid making those turns. They could come on their bicycle with their stroller, with their motor, with whatever, their e-scooter, and just get up to the Hopkins Center and then cross over to the green and their central campus from that direction. There's got to be some way to wind through there without doing it all on Crosby Street and on Wheelock Street. That's all. Things will change, and it's just good to plan off-road vehicle paths if you can, in my opinion.
yeah. I mean, one thing that is concerning there is the parked cars. And, it's hard to kind of make a shared street. It's not impossible. It's certainly doable, but I'd rather be in a side path on Crosby Street personally than people backing out towards me. Everyone's different on that regard. And the network also needs to be sort of understandable to people. Maybe both works. Behind the alumni gym, the connection to Valley Road, I don't think there's some parking. It's not as much. My sense is it's that one people use now, and it certainly works. I don't know if it needs to be instead of other connections in that direction. I think Wheelock Street is very, very important in that regard.
So Carolyn,
Okay,
let me
how
ask
are we
you-
doing?
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Given that the town likes the income from parking in the town, and that certainly in this location, they're gonna be losing parking revenue and likely in other places in town to make way for this kind of infrastructure, they may lose more parking income. Has that been discussed or is something that needs to be evaluated?
Well, it's going to be an issue. Losing any parking in Hanover is going to be an issue. There's no two ways about that. But we can't build a high comfort network. We've done everything we can do by striping, shoulders. It's like, to go to the next level, there's three big constraints. The one constraint is on-street parking. Another constraint is turn lanes at intersections. Another constraint is trees, big trees that are in the verges. So those are the things that are all, constraints that have to be worked around in order to have a network that is high comfort. And so I certainly think that it'll be, hard for people to make that change. And it's the discussion that we have in almost every town we work in. And it's, it has to be just decided, by the selectmen and, the planning department and how they want to proceed. But you're not going to get the goals that are in the master plan. The master plan talks about all ages and ability, vision zero safety, complete streets, mode shift. You can't do that with sharrows down the middle of a lane on, a street that has 8,000 vehicles per day. So it's a balancing act. And there's nothing there. Something has to give. And so it depends on, what the decision is to go forward. And I don't know what that is. I'm just saying physically what can fit and what can't fit based on, a network that provides separation when you have a certain volume and speed.
Carolyn, I really appreciate all of these designs. I think and how it aligns with the master plan. And we've addressed this in the master plan, this need to rebalance and make sure we're serving more people and letting them get around more space efficiently, more economically efficiently, and more sustainably. So this is really exciting. I'm all in on roundabouts. Maybe I'm a little cuckoo for them at the moment, but I'm really excited to see how that would look with the mini roundabout, because I think that would further solve a lot of the challenges that people face when they do try to ride around.
Yeah.
A lot of the feedback I hear, I think it seemed to show up on the survey that a lot of the trepidation is really specifically around certain intersections. and figuring out how to handle the intersections, if we can do
Right.
that in a way that really does allow people to move around. I guess the one other intersection you brought up, West Wheelock and Thayer. That one, there was a Thayer engineering study, and they did like just a half an hour study on a weekday in winter. And they looked at pedestrian behavior, and 70% of people were crossing against the light in various directions. So it's not only that they don't want to wait, people just aren't waiting. And they said it was a variety of ages. In fact, the people who paused the least tended to be older. They knew what they were doing. They just looked
Right.
at it and went on across. So, I mean, I think to build out a network, it's right to look first at safety. But just like when we're looking at transit and convenience, it's important also to look at, does this actually work for people? Like, is it inviting people to choose a mode that is gonna be more sustainable for everyone?
Yeah.
I just want to make one more comment while we're talking about Crosby Street, just so it's clear.
Yeah.
So Dartmouth College is kind of on the hook for improvements to Crosby Street because the town's agreed to close it. And so I'm being quiet because at some point the college is going to want to engage in conversation about what this ultimate design should be. I mean, from my perspective, the committee and the town should drive the vision. So I don't want to speak to this particular item right now because I don't want to kind of create any conflict. And so, but I think, you know, the committee has a vision for what it should be. I guess the only thing I'd comment, at some point, there will need to be a discussion with the town because I think ultimately, you know, the way I guess Rob has kind of teed this up is the agreement was, yeah, we'll close the street. We agree to that, but you guys are going to bring it back as kind of this plan envisions. And so, because I had thoughts about this, but I don't want to talk in this meeting because of that, because of that perceived conflict. So I want to make that clear to everybody here. I think all the ideas that were suggested are worth exploring, and I don't
Yeah.
want to.
I mean, I think the
I
other
have more ideas.
Yeah, let's see the other ideas. I mean, you already know there's like a history of sort of sidewalk riding in this general vicinity as well.
Right.
And I know it was counted in the past on the north side of Lebanon, but it's also kind of on the south side of Lebanon.
So the south side, so I did also a sketch at the high school and a sketch at the co-op intersection. So it is, we're almost at time. Like, should I do those now or should we table those for next month?
Get a preview.
Let's get a preview.
Film now.
Okay, a preview. Okay, hold on to your hat. Okay, so again, you know, we looked at, you know, how could we, sorry, my screen is being a little funky. These are big files. It'll settle down in a minute. You know, how could we, you know, get separated by, because this is the high school. You know, it's like, you know, a lot of kids. And it seems like being able to go, you know, comfortably. I mean, if you think really big picture, from downtown all the way to the hospital along the south side of Lebanon Street is kind of perfect. Like, you know, just whoop up and back. So it seems like, you know, something that would be worth exploring. So we looked here on Lebanon Street and we took the parking off the north side to get more space. And when you do that, and we could, you know, have a two-way here that's separated from the sidewalk and protects those big trees in front of the Catholic Church that is between Hovey Lane and Crosby Street. This is parking for the church, you know, right along there. So this is a parking protected two-way facility. And this is, you know, this is a step out zone here. So you can open your car door and get out and not be in the bike lane. And then this is a shared use path So the road lanes are pushed north. So you can widen up here, the shared use paths to come through, keeping the bus loading and unloading and the pickup and drop off loading and unloading by, taking out these handful of spaces on the north side. And bringing the shared use path through here. In this look here between Summer and the co-op, this is now shared use path. So this is mixing bikes and peds, but it's 15 feet wide. So that's pretty wide, with a 5-foot buffer. So this is pretty comfortable here. In this location, this is going somewhat onto the high school property, and keeping the parking. So, we figured we could work with the high school about that, rather than taking the parking out, and put that through there. Because in terms of construction, it's grass. So that seems like that would serve the high school well, but it is a negotiation. But it's something that can be talked about. And then, so the co-op intersection. So then we looked at the co-op intersection because everybody, this one is so difficult to get around in. And, the problem is these two streets come in at an acute angle. And, being able to move through this intersection again, these are two minis, and it allows you to gain space for multimodal accommodations. It would also handle the traffic better, and it allows people to move through the area and gives you space on both sides. So these are shared use paths that are going around here. The mini, this was a lot to kind of think through in terms of the co-op access. Could we have just done it here? But then, the driveway is really close to the door. So this, the co-op driveway and the service center driveway is, it's a big kind of component of this intersection, as well as, where South Park and Lebanon come together. So, I know people have talked about this a lot as, a roundabout, but it's, this is what it would take under current conditions. And, I don't think the co-op's going anywhere, but it certainly would be a lot easier to get to the co-op. And these all operate independently. So you could come through here and make this left turn here. You don't have to go all the way through. Sometimes these are called, like a dog bone, and you'd have to go all the way up here in order to make a left turn, but these do operate separately. So we just wanted to see what would fit.
Is the driveway on the bottom, on the north side, is that the high school driveway or is that a different driveway?
School,
Yeah, right there.
This one, I think, is this the,
Sure, like, is it the street that goes behind the high school or does it go to
no,
that?
that's down here, I think.
Okay, that makes sense.
That property.
That's like a house, I'm forgetting what it's called. It's
It's a Friends Meeting House, right?
yeah, the Friends Meeting House, yes, thank you.
I think that's what it might be.
And I've had people have some trouble there. We actually had an injury crash there recently, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So it'd be actually good to make it more of a proper driveway.
You
I
know,
think
they,
it's really interesting. It really would allow people to move, but keep everything pretty calm and crossable. Scott, what are your thoughts?
the Friends Meeting House driveway is about 5 feet from the driveway that goes around behind the high school. So I'm not sure that,
So this might be that might be one of the houses there, and I
you know,
think that
I think that's the one where they have the light that lets people get out of the driveway at the house.
oh, is that right?
I think.
Yeah.
And I think the Friends Meeting House is further to the left, as is the high school.
This might be Friends Meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these are a couple houses. I think this looks so wide because I think it's a little park. There's several parked cars there. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
There's like students that live there.
Yeah.
So there's several houses.
I think you're right.
But then, you know, the possibility of, you know, continuing. And when you go in this direction, you know, there's so many lanes here. There's so many lanes here, you know, across South Park and Lebanon, and also across Lebanon Street. And, you know, that's the great thing about roundabouts, is that they, you don't need all those turn lanes, and they handle traffic better, and multimodal accommodation. This is a big project.
Yeah.
You know, to reconstruct this is a big deal. But, you know, it works from a traffic volume point of view. It works geometrically. There's a little bit of property impact. There's a little bit of property impact, not a lot. A little bit at the co-op. It makes their entry, I think, better. They get some more parking spaces. Anyway, so.
Carolyn, I was wondering, in something like this, is it feasible to also like have like a raised continuous path across some of those driveways where there is an offset, where you have like a curb protection? Or
Yes,
yes. Does that work?
Yes.
Or
We would want to keep it at sidewalk level, certainly on this side. And that's one thing that I would change, I think, on this drawing. We have this space here, which means that we can ramp up to this being at sidewalk level. So,
and my question is a little bit related, but how do you envision bicyclists going on? Like if you were, say, coming down the west side of Lebanon or south side of Lebanon, if you were coming into town and you then wanted to go to
here.
Yeah.
So you cross over here. These are all shared use paths that go around it here. So you would come down here and you'd cross over here and come through. And this is where you'd park.
So, okay, so I couldn't quite see the cursor.
Yeah, sorry, apologize, yeah.
Just follow the white on the north side there.
Yeah, follow the white here.
Okay, so it would kind of work a little bit like the roundabout that was sort of on the other side of the hospital, Heater and Mount Support, like in that.
Yeah.
Basically just get to stay in your place. You get to
Yeah.
follow the path.
So yeah, this is a 10-foot shared use that goes around it, which is kind of a standard treatment now for roundabouts to go around here. So that's how that would work. And it would come down this side of South Park Street also, because, you know, again, when we look big picture at the network, you know, we want to try and stay on one side, right? And this is the pinchiest part. This block, the co-op block, is the pinchiest kind of part of South Park Street. You know, the sidewalk is still here. It's not drawn in, but you know, this ideally we would have shared use on the west side of South Park all the way up to Lime Road. I mean, again, that's long term. That's like, you know, very long term. But, you know, that's, you know, the idea is to have a shared understanding of how the street network is, and, you know, what's separated, what streets are separated, and, you know, what side of the street are we on if we're on one side of the street. And then over time, the pieces come into place. And so, you know, it is kind of saying, you know, the west side of Park Street, north and south Park Street, you know, the north side of Lime Road, all the way out to, you know, whatever. I mean, some people at the workshops want to go all the way to Lime. I mean, you get into the state road there, we can only control what's in the urban compact, but you know, the north side of Lime Road, the north side of Wheelock, maybe in the center of town, maybe both sides. It just depends on, you know, what can fit. With, you know, there's new housing going in on both sides of West Wheelock Street and that kind of thing. But, you know, at a minimum to come through on the north side, you know, that means even a path on the green on, you know, parallel to East Wheelock Street, to make that connection across so that, you know, we have clear, you know, idea of where we want bikes to be on these streets.
Thank you, Carolyn. This is really exciting. That's a huge kind of hot mess of problems that you made look like it was super navigatable.
Yeah, so this is the geometry. How would the geometry work? Like, you know, again, it's long term, it's a lot of money, but at least it's a start of understanding what could it be. Because like, I think we talk a lot at a very abstract level, like we want a roundabout here, we want it here. Well, what would it really take? And so this helps to understand what works geometrically.
Looks good to me.
Thank you so much. Do we get you again, or do I?
Yes, I mean, this has been like so much to absorb. So in the slide deck, which is shared on the Google Drive, the slides that I didn't get to are sort of a beginning. It's just a list, just taken from, you know, the input that we've gotten, and then also what we know about the network of like, you know, let's start to compile a list of, you know, complete street, you know, improvement projects. This is getting to the implementation side of it. And then, you know, what are the links? And then we prioritize. And so I can share my screen again here quickly and we can pick this up, but I have a couple slides, network improvements to be developed with the bike walk committee. Let's see, I'm just going to share here. So these are some of the things that have, you know, kind of come through. Crosby Street, West Wheelock, East Wheelock, you know, again, thinking about kind of the safety.
We're not
analysis.
seeing, are you?
See it.
Do you want to?
Not shared.
Oh, I'm not sharing?
No.
Whoopsie. Sorry. Crosby Street. And this is just, you know, listening to people thinking about ongoing construction projects, thinking about the safety considerations, the Wheelocks, Crosby, and then, you know, the Lime Road shared use path, like can we finish it through the intersection? I know it's hard. There's a giant, you know, signal mast, but that's such a key link. It's such a key link to get at least to the Park College Dewey Field intersection, you know, and that would take some, you know, engineering and looking at that intersection there. You know, we also got safety concerns from people about that intersection as well. You know, extending the Line Road path to the Richmond School and beyond, you know, to the urban compact. You know, the South Main Street downtown complete street improvement. So, you know, we did some concepts for that a while ago. You know, the cycle tracks on both sides, I think, would work there best, just from a maintenance point of view. Lebanon Street, downtown high school, we talked about that right now. You know, South Street, the you know, from the library to the path that goes to Hovey Lane, you know, again, if there's those parking spaces, then, you know, you can't do anything. But like, it seems like a sidewalk and a contraflow bike lane is needed at that location.
Yeah.
I know, you know, again, that comes
Another,
at cost of parking spaces. But, you know, the library has the park across, the lot across South Street, and it's the lot. So, you know, I mean, that's a pretty important link. Like the picture I had here, you know, these little kids, that's where they were. They were crossing to that path. Two on bikes, you know, two little ones walking with their parents. So, you know, it's like it's in town. There's people that want to move and go through there, all ages and abilities. Network improvements, some candidates, and this is just a starting point, and this is to be filled in more with the committee, but sidewalks, there's a missing sidewalk on Maple Street. That's kind of a key downtown street there between the parking lots. Rip Road, so that came up a lot in the comments. It, you know, like I said, it's like a decades old conversation. Reservoir Road, but we did see, like on Strava, there's a lot of people walking on Rip Road. So, you know, maybe it's time for a conversation. Is it shared streets with more calming? Is it a like Valley Road? Initially, the Valley Road idea was kind of a pilot for Rip Road. So, you know, maybe there's a conversation about that. Reservoir Road, you know, again, being able to connect through, again, school, Oak Hill, Stores Ponds, you know, a lot of all ages and ability type location, in-town location would be nice to be able to ride on Reservoir Road outside of traffic, even though, and this is actually the volumes are telling us to separate. Brook Road, so another comment that came up, this is just a little short path from the end of the Mink Brook Trail to South Main Street. It's kind of a location where people can swing around the corner if they're going northbound. So that one came up. So that's an idea. There may be others as well. Intersections, Dunster, Wyeth, Crosby, Lebanon, Crosby, East Wheelock, the Co-op intersection, you know, the North Park College Lime shared use path intersection. So this is just starting the list. And then, you know, let's prioritize.
Did you send this presentation out already? I know you sent it
Yeah.
in Zoom. Did you send it out already?
well, it's in our Google Drive, so under, I put it in this meeting's folder.
Okay, great.
I can email it to
No,
everyone
that's
if
fine.
people
This is
would
a
like,
meeting
and
folder.
then this is the presentation, so you can look at these specific street names and start thinking about anything that you would consider to add to the list. I think that's great homework for everyone to do. Any other homework, Carolyn?
So one thing is, you know, the question then comes about what about Greensboro Road? It's so thorny of an issue because it's state owned and it's in bad shape. So, but, you know, a lot of comments about Greensboro Road sidewalk. And there have been, again, that's another one of those historic conversations that goes back like Rip Road, Scott knows, you know, so like what can be done? And, you know, when we're talking to the state, you know, I don't know, like Rob has mentioned in the past, there's been deals made and like, you know, where the state upgrades, I think they would be happy to get rid of that street, honestly, and not be responsible for maintaining it. I don't know. I like they upgrade it and then the town won't accept it in its current condition. So, you know, so what do? Like, we can't even restripe it. We can't put a sign on it. We can't change that signal so that it detects bikes because it's all owned by the state. So it just is a really tough, it's a tough one.
And it's interesting in the new master plan, it was hinted at, I would say, in the 2003 master plan, but in the new master plan, it's very, very clear that the land use patterns includes Greensboro because it has both water and sewer
Right.
up until Etna Village, and it's a way to connect to Etna Village, one of our 2 village locations.
Right.
So it has been embraced as a place where, like the rest of the urban compact infill development is desired.
Yeah.
Once we have the infrastructure to support it outside of walking and biking. I know Rob's also talked about a potential sewer easement for a sidewalk. That's a little bit beyond the scope of this, but that's something that we should see if that could be done like independent of purchasing the road or taking ownership of the road. And I know Rob had been concerned about like how to negotiate this given the changing circumstances at NHDOT, but I think it's something that we need to be top of mind. We have a significant
Yeah.
chunk of our population lives there. They're within walking, biking distance of a lot of things, and they're on sewer and water.
It seems like it's, with
our
the,
plan, basically, to connect it.
right, and with the missing middle zoning, it seems like Greensboro would have more, and there is a lot of housing there, Velvet Rocks, all of that. And, it seems important. I don't know if talking to the delegation, that we have, something.
Yeah, maybe it's also talking to just seeing, digging deeper into NHDOT's walk bike network, which seem to deal with longer stretches between towns, but maybe just sort of raising this with them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So yeah, it's,
Big push for safety came out today that the governor is supporting, mostly in terms of enforcement, but thinking
Yeah.
about speed, vulnerable road users, the whole works.
right.
There was
Exactly.
a lot of discussion, there was a lot of discussion in the past about the sewer line easement becoming a shared use path on the way out there. I think one of the stumbling blocks there is that the easements of the property owners allows for the sewer line to go through, but it does not allow for a multi-use path to go through. And so to convert that to a multi-use path, you'd have to renegotiate all of the easements of the property owners along the sewer line.
Yes, that's right. It's not a public access easement sewer. That's what I always had heard. And it had been talked about again, at the in-person workshops, a lot of people from Greensboro Road were, sort of out in force. And so, it's sort of something to talk about corridor wide, possibly. But I think, understanding the constraints and, maybe talking with DOT when you talk about making the connection to DH. It's important road.
Yeah.
So, so there we are. So if we're talking about a vision plan, like definitely, it needs to be in the vision for Greensboro. In terms of when we start to talk about, priorities, that's when I don't know what to say about the roads that are owned by the state.
So I'll try to get some clarity as to how that may happen.
I regret, I'm gonna have to leave too in a moment. I don't know whether you have more agenda items we're going to be addressing, but I have to go
Okay.
shortly.
Bye, Bill. It was nice to see you. It's nice to see everybody. I will plan to be back next month to continue our discussion and, get input from you to start to kind of do that prioritized list.
Thank you.
Sound
Thank
good?
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you.
Jenny, may I just
Thank you,
ask the two new people here, are you new members of the committee? Are you kind of sitting in to learn stuff?
We're sitting in, we're members of the Dartmouth newspaper.
Okay, for the paper.
So
Okay,
we're reporting on the consulting initiative. And we were actually, if you have a moment, we'd like to ask you for a comment.
happy to stay. Is Kent still working with you? Is he?
Kent,
Yes, he let us know about
Uh-huh.
this, actually.
Okay, he's
So that's the reason we're here.
Yeah,
Good, okay. Good, I'll chat with you for a moment. If you have some stuff you're interested in, that's fine. We're always looking for new members of the committee.
Thank you,
That's why I'm just
Caroline.
trying to.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Jenny.
It was interesting.